What is your best or worst? Don't meet your hero's story. Story 1. I was visiting Los Angeles with my family, and we decided to take a tour of a famous movie studio. As we were walking through one of the backlots, we bumped into Tom Hanks. He was incredibly gracious, even though he was clearly on his way to a meeting. He stopped to chat with us, asking about our trip and taking photos with my kids. He even gave them some encouraging words about pursuing their dreams. It was a brief encounter, but it was genuine and heartwarming. It reinforced my admiration for him as both an actor and a person. Story 2. I've always admired Robert De Niro's intensity and commitment to his craft. So, when I found myself at a small independent film festival where he was doing a Q&A, I was beyond excited. I managed to snag a front row seat. When the Q&A opened to the audience, I raised my hand, eager to ask a thoughtful question about his method of acting. After being called upon, I began to ask a very elaborate question about his work in Raging Bull. He stared at me with this blank, almost menacing expression. I could see him processing that I was asking a complex question. After a long pause, he just shrugged and said, "Next question." No elaboration, no insight, just a dismissive grunt. It was like I'd interrupted his nap. The moderator quickly moved on, and I was left feeling deflated and embarrassed. The whole experience was a stark reminder that even the most talented artists can be less than engaging in person. Story 3. At a corporate training session, we had all the best mechanical engineers in one place, and I know one dude from reputation. One of those guys that could take a downed helicopter and get it flying again with very little time and spare parts. His record was amazing. He raked in huge sums over this reputation. I found out he'd sign off riskier projects under other people's names. So if it turned out to not be doable, his reputation would remain intact, and most of those miracle patchworks that I mentioned would be at the cost of tearing down other functional equipment. So he'd take a vehicle with torn to crap, boast about how he'd put it back together, then proceed to take parts from another of the same kind, but with minor damages and still working, break it down, and use that to repair his pet project, effectively breaking 3 to 4 vehicles to repair one and make himself look good. Huge bumhole. Story 4. Went to see Penn and Teller in Vegas, and one of their magic tricks during the show involved the audience. The trick worked for everyone in my family, but not for me. Now they're well known for meeting people after their show, so we stayed, got autographs and photos with them. Even Teller was talking. They couldn't have been nicer. Penn asked me what you'd think of the show, so my stupid mouth just fired back, "Your audience trick didn't work." He then asked my family, "Did it work for you?" They all nodded, and with an enthusiastic yes. Without missing a beat, he turns to me, "Well, there's the problem, you're an idiot." Getting personally insulted by Penn was the high point of that Vegas trip. Story 5. I'm a massive Ariana Grande fan. Her music has been a constant in my life. So when I heard she was doing a surprise meet and greet at a local mall, I skipped school and rushed over. I waited in line for hours, my heart pounding with anticipation. When it was finally my turn, I was so nervous I could barely speak. I managed to stutter out how much I loved her music, and she gave me a polite but clearly rushed smile. I asked for a photo, and she posed with me, but her eyes were darting around, clearly eager to move on to the next fan. As I was being ushered away, I tried to give her a small gift I'd made, but a security guard intercepted it, saying she couldn't accept anything. The whole experience felt impersonal and manufactured. I understand she's busy, but it still left me feeling a little disappointed. Story 6. I was at an industry party, hoping to network and make connections. I saw James Franco across the room, and, being a fan of his eclectic work, decided to introduce myself. He was initially charming, engaging me in a conversation about independent cinema. But then, his demeanor shifted. He started making increasingly suggestive comments, and his hand lingered a little too long on my arm. He offered to help me with my career, but it was clear what he meant. I politely excused myself, but the encounter left me feeling violated and uncomfortable. It was a stark reminder that even in the entertainment industry, power dynamics can be abused. Story 7. As an aspiring chef, I idolized Gordon Ramsay. His passion and dedication to culinary excellence were inspiring. I managed to get a job as a line cook at one of his restaurants, hoping to learn from the best. My first shift was a nightmare. He was even more intense in person than he is on TV. He yelled, he swore, and he constantly criticized my work. I understand he's a perfectionist, but his behavior was borderline abusive. I lasted only a few weeks before quitting. It was a harsh lesson about the reality of working in a high-pressure kitchen. Story 8. I saw Meryl Streep at a theater festival. I waited to approach her until she was alone. I told her how much her work had inspired me and asked a question about her process. She looked at me with a blank stare, gave a short, dismissive answer and walked away. It was like she couldn't be bothered. It was a reminder that even the most respected artists can be aloof. Story 9. I worked as a cashier in a State Line, Nevada casino in the early 80s. Part of our training included a warning that Bruce Dern often gambled in the early morning, and he did not like to be recognized. I've been a huge Bruce Dern fan since Silent Running, and it was enough for me to spot him from across the room. One day, I'm training a new hire and Mr. Dern came to our window. I had forgotten to warn my trainee about him. After the trainee cashed out his chips, he says, "Has anyone ever told you that you look just like Bruce Dern?" Mr. Dern grins and says, "I get that a lot," and walks away. Made my day. Story 10. In middle school, I wrote a research project on Thor Heyerdahl and Easter Island. In high school, I wrote another about his reed boat Atlantic crossing attempt. I went to college to study anthropology, inspired by him, and Indiana Jones, I was 15, please be understanding. Through a series of family financial setbacks, my funds for graduate school disappeared, and I joined the military to earn the money to finish my education. While stationed in Charleston, SC, I was with a friend walking along the pier when I saw a beautiful three-masted ship ahead. I went to look at it and saw it was flying a Norwegian flag. I got closer and started talking with one of the people on the ship. She said they were college students on a foreign study trip, sailing the ship from Bergen all the way around to South America. That sounded incredible. As I was looking around, I noticed the ship was named the Heyerdahl. I commented that I wrote papers on Thor and got my degrees based on my admiration for him. She asked if I had ever met him, and I just laughed. I was a regular kid from western South Dakota. What were the chances I'd ever get to meet him? She said he was right over at a cafe less than a block away. I remember with unbelievable clarity. He was sitting on a little white bench outside the place with a disposable cup of something, with a book in his hand. There was a small table and chair not far away, and I could only just sit and look. He looked up about a minute or two later, saw me, and said, "I'm sorry, but are you all right?" I didn't even realize I was emotional. Over the next hour and a half, I talked and listened to him. Watched him smile and talk about how adventures still existed. You just had to find them, and live them whenever you could. He invited me to visit him if I was ever in Norway, and we both chuckled at that. When he passed away in 02, I was deeply saddened. I live in Atlanta now, and a little over a year ago, my spouse and I went to Charleston for a few days. After dinner one evening, we were walking along the pier, and I saw where the ship had been tied up. Nothing there at that moment. Then I turned to where the cafe was and saw the bench. I sat where he sat for a while. Story 11. Met Dolly Parton at a charity event. She was so warm and genuine. She talked to me like we were old friends. She asked about my life, my family, and my passions. She even sang a little song for me. It was a truly special moment. She's a reminder that even the most famous people can be down to earth and kind. Story 12. I had a very strange interaction with a musical performer back in 2016. I was 17 and had a difficult day. I just came from a childhood friend's memorial service, but my family didn't want to miss the musical since we had booked months ago, and the tickets were expensive, so they brought me along hoping it would make me feel better. It actually did, mainly because of a solo this musical performer had, which really improved my mood. So at the end of the night, I looked up his name, mentioned him in a harmless tweet, praising him for his talent. He liked the tweet, followed me on Twitter, and then we didn't have any interaction for almost a year. Until my 18th birthday, when I posted a picture of a gift with a caption like "Happy Birthday to me, finally an adult," or something similar. He sent me a private message congratulating me, and I was super excited that someone as well known as him would talk to me. So I thanked him, and we messaged a bit back and forth, actually getting along quite well and sharing some interests. Looking back, the messages were already kind of flirtatious, but I was shy and inexperienced, and also, I was 18, and he was almost 40. So I didn't want to see it and just dismissed it. So at one point, we became friends on Facebook, since messaging there was nicer than on Twitter, and we messaged quite frequently for about 2 weeks. One day, we messaged for hours, so he was like, "Hey, why don't we talk on a video call?" Wouldn't that be nicer than writing? You possibly see where this is going, but I didn't. Please don't blame me for being naive. I was just super young and starstruck. Of course, I said yes. He called me, and we talked for about half an hour, about his job, about our day, just everything. And without any notice, he just started removing his clothing and suggested I do the same. Reality hit me like a shock, and after just staring at my screen for a minute, I ended the call and decided that maybe I should stop idolizing people. Haven't heard from him since except for a short story, but learned a lot from that. Also, this is a very fun story to tell at gatherings. Story 13. Beyonce has been a massive influence on my dancing. I got to see her in concert, and I was so excited. But the concert felt off. It was like she was going through the motions. The dancing was technically perfect, but there was no spark, no soul. It was a highly produced, almost robotic performance. I left feeling underwhelmed. I had expected a raw, emotional experience, but it was just a polished show. Story 14. I ran into Keanu Reeves at a gaming convention. I was so excited, but I completely froze. I tried to say something cool, but I just blurted out, "You're breathtaking." He gave me a polite, but slightly confused, smile and said, "You're breathtaking too." It was an awkward exchange, but he was still incredibly kind and patient. He even took a photo with me, even though I was clearly a bumbling mess. Story 15. Look, I get it, celebrities are busy. But still, the way this went down, it was rough. I've been a massive fan of Leonardo DiCaprio since Titanic, and I knew he was doing a book signing in my city. I camped out overnight, freezing my butt off, just to get a chance to meet him. When I finally got to the front of the line, he barely glanced at me. He scribbled his name on my book, didn't even make eye contact, and then barked at the security guard to move me along. I tried to say something, anything, but it was like I was invisible. I walked away feeling like a complete nobody. I bet he's probably tired of signing stuff, but a little basic human decency wouldn't have killed him. It just made me realize these people are just people. Some are nice, some are not. Story 16. I'd always admired this big-name director, the one who does those gritty, thought-provoking films. I managed to get an internship on their latest project, thinking it would be a dream come true. Boy, was I wrong. The director was a nightmare, constantly berating the crew, changing their mind every 5 minutes, and just generally creating a toxic atmosphere. One day, I dared to offer a suggestion about a scene, and they just ripped me apart, calling my idea amateurish and pathetic. I was mortified. I ended up quitting halfway through the project. It was a harsh lesson about the difference between admiring someone's work and actually working with them. Some people are brilliant, but they're also just unpleasant. Story 17. I was playing a small gig at a local bar, and after the show, this really famous musician, someone I'd listened to growing up, came up to me. I was completely starstruck. They were incredibly chill though, just hanging out and talking about music. They asked about my influences, complimented my songwriting, and even gave me some really solid advice about the industry. It was a completely unexpected and genuinely cool experience. It made me realize that some celebrities are actually just regular people who happen to be really talented. It was a boost of confidence for me. Story 18. I follow this actress on social media. She always seems so bubbly and positive, posting inspirational quotes and behind-the-scenes photos. When I met her at a convention, she was completely different. She was cold and distant, barely making eye contact. She seemed annoyed by the fans like we were a nuisance. It was a huge disconnect from the persona she presented online. It made me realize how carefully curated social media is, and how it's not always a reflection of reality. Story 19. I met Weird Al and got starstruck, and didn't know what to say to him. I finally blurted out, "I know you probably hear this a lot, but I'm a huge fan." He smiled and responded, "I do hear that a lot, but I've never heard it from you." Made my day. Story 20. I've been a long-time admirer of a certain author. They write the most amazing fantasy novels. I joined a book club. When I heard they were doing a small signing and Q&A, I was so excited. I even brought a first edition of their first book. When I was called up, I asked a question about the symbolism in the book. The author looked at me with a blank expression and said, "I have no idea what you are talking about." Then they turned to the next person. I was so embarrassed. I had read all their books, and I felt like a fool. I decided to give up on meeting my heroes after that.
That's a wrap for this video. Make sure to leave your relatable story down in the comments. I would love to make a video on them. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.